The Force is light and full of shadows.
Before we dive in, check the link in the description. If you want exclusive Timelines members-only videos you won't find on YouTube, all on our Patreon. The second Death Star. 4AB. The reactor shaft opens like a wound in the belly of the station, dropping away into a darkness so complete it has its own weight. Darth Vader stands at its edge. His breathing fills the chamber, that rhythmic mechanical rasp that has governed his existence for 23 years, steady as a metronome, as constant as the dark side itself. His son is behind him. Luke Skywalker, kneeling, watching with an expression Vader has only seen once before in his life, the face of someone who still believes rescue is possible. The face of someone who has not yet learned that some things cannot be undone. The Emperor raises his hands. The lightning comes. It comes in sheets, in waves, in something that stops registering as sensation and becomes simply presence. A total occupation of every nerve, every circuit, every shard of the man that still exists inside the black armor. Vader's vocoder screams a frequency it was never designed to produce. His legs give. The floor of the throne room rises to meet him, and then he is moving without deciding to move, his body responding to something older and deeper than thought, crossing the distance between Luke and Sidious in 4 strides that cost him everything he has left. He lifts his master. The lightning redirects, courses back, arcs through the failing power coupling of his own chest plate, and travels up through his palms, and he holds on anyway, because the boy is watching, and that is the only calculation that matters now. Palpatine falls. The shaft takes him. The darkness swallows the shriek of a man who has not made a sound like that in 40 years, not since he was someone else entirely. A sound stripped of all performance, all patience, all the warm grandfatherly tenor that fooled a galaxy. What falls into that shaft is not a senator, not a chancellor, not even a Sith Lord. It is something rawer than any of those things, something older, screaming as it goes. Vader collapses. The floor is cold through his gauntlets. The vocoder has stopped producing language. Luke's hands find his helmet, and Vader registers it distantly. The boy's fingers at the seals, the hiss of pressure releasing, the sudden strange sensation of air that has not been filtered or processed. Just air, moving across skin he had forgotten he still possessed. He looks up at his son. Luke's face is streaked with tears, and there is something in his expression that Vader has no vocabulary for anymore. He tries to find words. The chest plate gives 3 labored cycles and then does not cycle again. The Force takes him between one breath and the next. Not darkness. Not the void he had expected, had perhaps deserved. 2 decades of it had seemed like fair preparation. It is the opposite of void. It is density, pressure. A sensation like every moment of his life compressed simultaneously into a single point of light that expands and then wrenching. The word is inadequate. There is no word. The cosmic force does not explain itself. It does not offer comfort or context, or any of the grace notes a dying man might hope for. There is only a tearing sensation at the root of something he had assumed was destroyed, a thread of the living force pulled taut and then released like a bowstring, and the darkness of the reactor shaft becomes something else entirely. Becomes a different darkness. Cool, still, the smell of expensive Coruscanti air, recirculated and precisely humidified, carrying the faint mineral scent of high-altitude city stone. The sound of the planet, a planet that never sleeps, whose constant low-frequency hum vibrates through every surface like a pulse. Sheev Palpatine opens his eyes. He is lying on the floor of his Senate apartment. The ceiling above him is cream-colored durasteel, familiar in the way that things become familiar over decades of careful living. Every detail chosen, every object placed with intention. A single lamp burns on the desk across the room. Through the tall windows, Coruscant's towers blaze in the permanent amber twilight of a city that substitutes electricity for stars. He does not move immediately. A man who has survived as long as he has, who has threaded the needle of a decades-long conspiracy through every intelligence apparatus in the known galaxy, does not move until he knows precisely where and when he is. He takes inventory. His hands, when he raises them, slowly, in front of his face, are smooth. The knuckles unswollen. The skin unblemished by the scarring that the Jedi's reflected lightning burned into him 4 years from now. He feels each finger in sequence. 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. 32 BB. He knows the date the way he knows his own heartbeat. The campaign is at a specific stage. The Senate in a particular configuration. The Naboo blockade not yet deployed. He has lived this year before. Lived through it with the exquisite precision of a man who has spent decades orchestrating every variable. He knows what is supposed to happen next. The Trade Federation. The blockade. The Queen. The vote of no confidence that will make him Chancellor. And the boy. The boy on Tatooine, 9 years old, with 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell, and a destiny Palpatine had spent years carefully positioning himself to inherit. Anakin Skywalker, who will walk into his life through a chain of engineered coincidences, who will spend a decade training in the Jedi Temple before the real work begins, who will break beautifully under the right pressure at the right time. But not for another 13 years, and never completely, never without the Jedi's fingerprints all over him, the Jedi's values lodged like shrapnel in places Palpatine could never fully reach. He sits up. The old approach had worked. That was not the question. The Empire had risen, the Jedi had burned, the Senate had applauded, and then ceased to matter. By any rational accounting, Sheev Palpatine had won. And yet, he had died screaming into a reactor shaft because a man he owned had looked at a boy he loved and made the only choice he had left. 23 years of investment, of patience, of masterful construction, and in the end it had collapsed, not from external pressure, not from political miscalculation, not from any failure of intelligence or strategy. It had collapsed because Anakin Skywalker had spent a decade with the Jedi first, and that decade had planted something in him that no amount of Sith philosophy had been able to fully extinguish. The light side had survived in him like an ember, and the boy had been the bellows. Palpatine's hands rest flat on the cool floor. His breathing is even. The lamp burns steadily on the desk. The mistake, he understands now with a clarity available only to the dead, was not in the execution. The mistake was in the architecture. He had tried to build the weapon on fear, on isolation and pain and the slow erosion of everything Anakin loved. He should have built it on love instead. He rises to his feet, crosses to the desk without hurry, sits, and folds his hands and stares through the tall window at the amber glow of 10 trillion lives going about their business with no awareness whatsoever that their history has just been given a second draft. Tatooine is 43 parsecs away. The Gardula the Hutt slave auction records are public, if one knows which procurement channels to access. A senator traveling to the Outer Rim at his own expense to liberate a slave woman and her gifted son would generate, he calculates, a very particular kind of attention. He allows himself, in the privacy of his own mind, one small, cold smile. Then he reaches for his comlink and begins to make arrangements. Tatooine, the Mos Espa slave quarter at midday. The twin suns hang overhead like two eyes that have never learned to blink, and the light they produce is not warmth, it is pressure, a physical weight that flattens everything beneath it. The clay walls, the hanging laundry, the children playing in the dust with pieces of broken machinery they have repurposed into toys. Because that is what children here learn to do with the wreckage of other people's lives. The street smells of heat and engine oil, and the particular staleness of recycled water used one too many times. A transport, sleek, senatorial, absurdly out of place, has been parked at the quarter's edge for the better part of an hour. 2 Coruscanti aides stand beside it, looking profoundly uncomfortable in their formal gray. They sweat through their collars and say nothing. They have been told to say nothing, and they are good at following instructions. Sheev Palpatine walks the street alone. This is deliberate. The aides offered an escort, offered protocol droids, offered the small armed detail that senatorial travel to the Outer Rim technically requires, and he had declined each suggestion with the same patient, faintly amused smile. The smile of a man who finds excessive caution slightly beneath him, which is exactly the impression he intends to leave on every aide, every record, and every security log from here to Coruscant. A senator who walks unguarded through a Tatooine slave quarter is either a fool or a man of genuine conviction. He is dressed simply. No senatorial robes, those are folded in the transport. A plain dark tunic, practical boots, the kind of understated clothing that suggests a man who does not need fabric to communicate his importance. He carries nothing except a small data reader, and he moves through the narrow street with the unhurried ease of someone who has nowhere more important to be, which is perhaps the most powerful lie he has told in a life constructed almost entirely of them. He finds the right door from the records he spent 2 nights studying. 3rd row, 7th unit. The moisture collector on the roof is cracked, a detail that says everything worth knowing about the economics of the household before he has knocked. He knocks. The woman who opens the door is perhaps 40, with the kind of face that would have been beautiful 20 years ago on a planet that had not spent 20 years extracting its toll. Her eyes assess him in the practiced, rapid way of someone who has learned that every stranger at the door represents either a transaction or a threat, and the calculus between the two is what determines whether she opens it wider or closes it fast. She does neither. She waits. "Shmi Skywalker," Palpatine said. Not a question. His voice is warm and unhurried, a register he has spent decades calibrating to produce a specific involuntary response in whoever receives it. The sense of being recognized, of mattering, of being seen by someone worth being seen by. "My name is Sheev Palpatine. I am the senator for Naboo. I apologize for arriving without notice. I wonder if I might have a few minutes of your time." Shmi's expression does not change. Senators don't come to Mos Espa. This one did. He replied simply. A boy appears at her elbow, 9 years old, sandy-haired, with eyes that are too old for the face they occupy, eyes that have already done more calculating and observing and cataloging of threat than eyes that age have any right to have done. He looks at the senator without the wariness his mother has learned, and without the deference that Tatooine teaches children to perform around strangers who appear powerful. He simply looks. Directly, with a quality of attention that Palpatine, who has spent 60 years reading rooms and people, recognizes as something genuinely unusual. 20,000 midi-chlorians per cell. In the flesh, in the actual radiant presence of the boy, the Force hums against Palpatine's own sensitivity like a tuning fork struck against the edge of the galaxy. He keeps his expression exactly as it is, warm, patient, unhurried. "You must be Anakin," he said. The boy's chin came up slightly. "How do you know my name?" "Because I asked about you before I came," Palpatine replied. "I asked about the boy in the Mos Espa slave quarter who builds things, who races pods, who, I am told, built a protocol droid from salvage at the age of 6. He paused, and let the weight of the next sentence arrive quietly rather than with emphasis, the way the most important things always should. "I came a very long way to meet you, Anakin." Shmi's hand comes to rest on her son's shoulder. The gesture is protective and correct, and Palpatine respects it with a small deferential step backward, giving her space, giving her the visible body language of a man who understands the word no. Because the next several minutes will be built on her trust, not her fear, and it matters enormously that she feels the difference. "Come inside," she said finally. The interior of the house is exactly what the cracked moisture collector promised. Clean, scrupulously, defiantly clean in the way of people who have nothing to offer disorder and refuse to offer it dignity, but worn through to the structural honesty of a life that has never had enough. The furniture is mismatched. The kitchen is meticulous. On a shelf near the window sit several small mechanical objects arranged with a care that is not random, Anakin's work, each one, and the arrangement is the arrangement of a child who treats his creations like things worth treating carefully. Palpatine sits where he is offered, accepts the water he is offered, drinks it. "I'll be direct with you," he said, setting the cup down. "I have some familiarity with the acquisition records in this district. Watto's ledger is not difficult to access for someone with the right connections. I know what you are owed, and I know what you have been paid, and those are 2 different numbers that no decent system of law would permit." He let a beat pass. "I am in a position to make you a proposal, if you'll hear it." Shmi sat across from him. Her hands were folded in her lap. She was listening with her entire body in the particular way of someone who has trained herself not to hope too quickly. Because hope in this quarter has a cost she has paid before. "The proposal," she said. "I would like to purchase your freedom and your son's," Palpatine replied. "Both of you. Today, if Watto will negotiate. Which I believe he will." He glanced briefly at the boy, who had settled cross-legged on the floor nearby, still watching with that quality of focused attention that belonged on someone 3 times his age. Then back to Shmi. "I would like to bring you both to Coruscant. You would have proper housing, proper employment if you choose it, proper schooling for Anakin." He paused. "And I would like, if you are willing, to take a more formal role in his life, to see that his gifts are not wasted in this place." The silence that followed was not dramatic. It was the silence of a woman who has learned to examine every kindness for the mechanism hidden inside it. "Why?" she asked. It was the correct question. He had prepared 6 answers to it, each true in a different register, and he selected the one that was truest of all, which also happened to be the one most useful to him, which is how the best answers always work. "Because I walked this street an hour ago," Palpatine said quietly, "and I counted 7 children under the age of 12 playing in the dust, and I thought about what will happen to each of them. And I thought about the fact that I am a senator of the Galactic Republic, a body that has passed resolutions condemning slavery on 14 separate occasions without once committing the resources to end it, and I thought that there is one child on this street about whom I can do something specific and real." He looked at Anakin directly. "The Republic failed you before you were born. I am not able to fix the Republic today, but I can fix this." Anakin held his gaze without blinking. "My mom too," the boy said. "Not a question, a condition." "Your mother too," Palpatine confirmed. "I would not separate you. That is not a negotiating position. It is simply the only version of this arrangement I am offering." Something in Shmi's face shifted. Not relief exactly, not yet. The thing that shifts in a person when they recognize that the ground beneath an impossible hope might actually hold their weight, and they are terrified to find out, and they take the first careful step anyway. She looked at her son. He looked back at her. Some communication moved between them that required no words. The specific frequency of 2 people who have protected each other across years of a life that required protecting. "All right," she said. Outside, through the single small window, the twin suns burned on. And Sheev Palpatine, senator for Naboo, the most dangerous man alive, lifted his water cup and took a calm and measured sip. Coruscant, the Senate District. Residential Tier 7. 3 months after Tatooine. The apartment Palpatine has arranged for Shmi Skywalker occupies the 43rd floor of a building that costs more per month than the Mos Espa slave quarter generates in a year. The windows run floor to ceiling on 3 sides. At night, which on Coruscant is merely a dimming of the amber glow rather than any true darkness, the city spreads in every direction without horizon, tower after tower after tower, light stacked on light. The physical proof that civilization has been here so long, it has simply replaced the planet underneath it with itself. Anakin stands at the window most mornings before his tutor arrives. He does this for the same reason he used to stand at the edge of the Mos Espa landing pads and watch the ships come in, not from longing, exactly, but from the need to take inventory of the world he is in, to understand its dimensions before it surprises him. Old habit. Survival habit. The kind that does not disappear simply because the circumstances that produced it have been removed. He is still taking inventory. He is simply doing it at a much higher altitude. The tutor's name is Dorvan. He is 60, meticulous, and treats the education of a senator's adopted ward with the focused efficiency of a man who understands that his continued employment depends on measurable results. Each morning he arrives at precisely the same time, sets his materials on the same side of the table, and begins from wherever they left the previous session. Galactic history, political science, basic and 3 secondary languages, mathematics through calculus. He is an excellent tutor, thorough and unsentimental, and he has been selected by Palpatine's office with the same care that goes into every selection Palpatine makes, which is to say, more care than anyone observing the process would ever suspect. What Dorvan teaches is accurate. Every date, every battle, every treaty, accurate. What Dorvan's curriculum emphasizes, the shape of the history it constructs, the villains it centers and the heroes it footnotes, that is a different question, and not one Dorvan himself has been asked to consider. He teaches what he was given to teach. The framing arrived pre-built. Anakin absorbs it the way he absorbs everything, completely, at speed, with the kind of retention that makes Dorvan write careful notes in his private log about the unusual nature of this particular student. The boy does not merely memorize, he interrogates. He finds the load-bearing walls in every argument, and pushes on them until he understands which ones hold and which ones are decorative. At 9 years old, he argues Dorvan to a genuine standstill twice in the first month on the subject of the Republic's anti-slavery resolutions, wanting to know, specifically, why none of them had enforcement mechanisms, who had removed those mechanisms, and whether anyone had been held accountable. Dorvan reports this to Palpatine's office as a data point. Palpatine reads it the same evening and allows himself a quiet, sustained satisfaction that he is careful not to let reach his face, even alone. The boy is everything the Force suggested he would be. Better, possibly, the question of the Force itself is handled delicately. Palpatine has not raised it directly, not yet, not for several more months, but he has structured the environment to allow it to surface naturally, because the most durable revelations are the ones a person arrives at themselves. Anakin's mechanical intuition, the way he knows before testing which component will fail, the way he navigated the pod racing circuit by something he describes only as knowing where the track was going, these are permitted topics of casual conversation, never made strange, never made frightening. You have a gift, Palpatine tells him, when it comes up. Some people do. The galaxy is richer for them. This is not a lie. It is simply incomplete. Shmi watches. She is not foolish. She has never been foolish. Foolishness is a luxury that Tatooine strips away early and thoroughly, and Shmi Skywalker has always been one of the sharpest observers in any room she has occupied, which is part of why she survived that room for as long as she did. She watches the apartment, watches her son's education, watches the careful calibration of everything Senator Palpatine provides, and she feels a persistent unease she cannot locate precisely enough to name. Nothing is wrong. That is almost the thing she cannot name, the absence of anything specifically wrong, the seamlessness of it. The way every concern she forms dissolves against the concrete evidence of her son eating well and sleeping safely and learning things she could never have given him. She raises it with Palpatine directly, one evening when he visits, as he does every week, without fail, always at a reasonable hour, always with the manner of a man dropping in, rather than inspecting. "You've given us everything," she said. They are sitting across from each other at the small table near the kitchen, cups of tea between them, Anakin asleep down the hall. "I want to understand what you want from it." Palpatine regarded her with an expression of genuine respect. Not performed, genuine, or close enough to genuine that the distinction has long since ceased to matter. "You want to understand my interest in your son," he said. "Yes, that is the right question," he replied, "and you are right to ask it. I would be concerned if you didn't." He set his cup down. "I am going to tell you something that I ask you to hold in confidence. Not because it is secret, exactly, but because it will be easier for Anakin if it comes to him gradually rather than all at once. Your son has an extraordinary sensitivity to the Force, not merely unusual. Extraordinary, the kind of sensitivity that appears perhaps once in a generation, perhaps less." He paused. The Jedi Order would call it a gift and immediately move to take custody of it. I am not the Jedi Order. I have no intention of sending your son away to be raised by an institution that would require him to sever every attachment he has, including to you. Shmi was quiet for a long moment. "You know about the Force." "I have studied many things over a long life," Palpatine replied. "I know enough to recognize what I saw on Tatooine. And enough to know that what Anakin becomes should be his choice, shaped by people who love him, not determined by an order that would process him like a candidate rather than a child. He means every word. This is the crucial thing. The thing that makes him more dangerous than any villain who operates from contempt. He means it. On some level. In the way that a man can mean something and still be using it. The Jedi Order would take Anakin. They would train him in their image, constrain him in their doctrine, and produce a weapon they believed they controlled. Palpatine's objection to this is not entirely philosophical. But neither is it entirely cynical. Shmi looks at him across the table for a long time. If he ever asks to go to the Jedi, she said finally, I want you to let him. Of course, Palpatine replied, without hesitation. He will never need to break this promise. He will simply make certain, over years of patient architecture, that Anakin never asks. Down the hall, Anakin is not asleep. He is lying on his back in the dark, staring at the ceiling of a room that is still, after 3 months. Slightly surreal to him, the softness of the mattress, the regulated temperature, the silence that is not the silence of Tatooine, but the silence of sufficient insulation between himself and the world. His mind is running the way it always runs at night, cycling through the day's inputs, sorting and filing. He is thinking about what Dorvan said this morning. A tangent, a reference to the brewing tensions in the Outer Rim, which Dorvan's political history curriculum frames as a theoretical risk given the Senate's current dysfunction. The particular phrase Dorvan used was institutional failure. He defined it as what happens when a structure becomes more invested in its own continuity than in the problem it was built to solve. Anakin turned the phrase over, applied it to various structures he has been taught about. The Senate, the Trade Federation, the Jedi Order, which Dorvan described as a monastic institution of significant political influence and debated oversight, which had struck Anakin as a very careful way of saying something more pointed. He thought about the anti-slavery resolutions with no enforcement mechanisms. He thought about his mother's hands, that first night in the apartment, running across the kitchen counter with an expression he had not had words for then and still doesn't quite, the expression of someone touching a surface and not finding the thing they were braced for. He thought about the senator, who had come to a street that senators don't come to. The city glows through his curtains. 43 floors below, Coruscant continues its permanent humming insistence. Anakin closes his eyes and does what he has always done in the dark. He takes inventory. He maps the space around him. He finds all the exits. Old habit. Survival habit. He is not sure yet whether he still needs it. Coruscant. The Chancellor's private study. 5 years after Tatooine, the room exists in a register that most of the Senate building does not. Where the public chambers run to grandeur, high ceilings, formal stone, the architectural grammar of institutional power, this study is something more considered. Smaller, warmer the shelves hold actual books, physical ones, the kind that cost more than most citizens earn in a year, and are kept not for display but for use, their spines cracked, and their margins annotated in a small, precise hand. A single lamp burns on the desk. The window behind it frames the Coruscant skyline at dusk, the city transitioning from its daytime gray into its nighttime amber. And in that light, the room feels less like an office than like the inside of a mind that has been very carefully furnished. Palpatine has been Chancellor for 5 years. The transition happened exactly as he designed it: the Naboo crisis, the vote of no confidence, the emergency session, the groundswell of senatorial sympathy for a moderate man of proven decency who had, in full public view, spent his own money to liberate a slave child and raise him as a son. The optics were, by every measure, perfect. The opposition had nothing to attack that didn't make them look heartless, and most of them had the political instinct to recognize the trap even as they stepped into it. Anakin is 14 now. He sits in the chair across from Palpatine's desk the way he has sat in it for 5 years. With the particular quality of ease that comes not from comfort but from certainty, the ease of someone who knows this room is for him, who has never been made to feel otherwise. He is taller. The sandy hair has darkened slightly. The eyes have not changed. Still that quality of attention that catalogs everything it touches. Still the eyes of someone who arrived in this galaxy already running the numbers. He has been reading Palpatine's copy of the Outer Rim Question, Separatism, Taxation, and the Limits of Republic Authority, a text that does not appear in the standard Republic educational curriculum, which is precisely why it is on the shelf, positioned at Anakin's eye level. Available without comment or instruction. Palpatine never assigns. He provides, and he waits, and he lets curiosity do the work that compulsion would ruin. They have real grievances, Anakin said, without preamble. He set the book on the desk between them. The Separatists. Not the Trade Federation. Their grievances are just about tariffs. I mean the outer systems. The ones that actually left. Yes, Palpatine agreed simply. Dorvan's curriculum calls them a destabilizing faction. Dorvan's curriculum reflects the Republic's official position, Palpatine replied, which is the position of the systems that benefit most from the current taxation structure. He let a pause settle. There is a meaningful difference between those two things. I would expect you to have noticed that by now. Anakin's jaw shifted slightly, not quite a smile. When did you first notice it? When I was approximately your age, Palpatine said, and my own tutors explained to me that Naboo's trade agreements with the Corps were mutually beneficial. I asked who had written the agreements. They told me the Senate. I asked who the Senate primarily represented at the time of writing. He opened his hands in a gesture of quiet conclusion. Institutions describe their own arrangements as natural. It is almost the definition of an institution. This is how it works. This is how it has always worked. In this room, across 5 years of weekly evenings, not instruction, not doctrine, not anything that could be identified and named and resisted. Conversation. The kind of conversation that a brilliant, curious, isolated 14-year-old receives from the only adult in his life, who treats his intelligence as a given, rather than a surprise, who never talks down, who always has time, who is never too busy or too tired or too distracted by the weight of running a galaxy to sit across a desk and engage with whatever Anakin has been thinking about. The other adults in Anakin's life are competent and kind and carefully selected. None of them do this. The Jedi support the Republic's position, Anakin said. He is not asking. He is placing a piece on a board, watching to see where Palpatine moves in response. The Jedi are an institution, Palpatine replied, with significant investment in the Republic's continued stability. Their temple sits on Coruscant. Their funding flows through Republic channels. Their legal standing, their right to operate, to carry weapons, to act with diplomatic authority across member systems, derives entirely from the Senate's recognition of them. He picked up his own cup and regarded it briefly. This does not make them corrupt. It makes them situated. All institutions are situated somewhere. The question worth asking about any institution is not whether it has interests, but whether it acknowledges them. Anakin absorbed this. His eyes moved to the middle distance in the specific way they do when he is not looking at anything in the room, but at the architecture of an idea, turning it to find the load-bearing walls. Do the Jedi acknowledge theirs? They believe, Palpatine said carefully, that their detachment from personal attachment grants them a corresponding detachment from institutional interest. It is a doctrine I find philosophically generous. He set the cup down. What I can tell you is that in 14 years of working closely with the Council, I have not once heard a Jedi Master ask who benefits from the Republic's current structure. I have heard them ask, many times, what the Force requires. Those are different questions. They are very different questions, Palpatine agreed. The lamp burns between them. Outside, the city deepens into amber. They wanted to train me, Anakin said. He says it without visible weight, which is itself a kind of weight, the flatness of a subject that has been processed until it no longer produces surface feeling, only something structural underneath. They did, Palpatine said. When you were 9. Master Windu raised it with my office formally. What did you tell them? I told them that I was your father insofar as anyone could claim that role, and that I had no intention of sending you away to an institution whose doctrine required you to consider me a liability. He paused. I told them that if they wished to speak with you directly when you were old enough to make informed decisions, I would not prevent that. I have not prevented it. This is technically accurate. He has not prevented it. He has simply ensured that by the time any Jedi has occasion to speak with Anakin Skywalker, they are meeting a person already formed, already in possession of a complete framework, a complete understanding of who the Jedi are and what they represent, and why their interest in him, specifically, should be regarded with clear eyes. Anakin looks at him. Do you think they were right about me? About the Force? I think, Palpatine said, that what you carry is real and significant, and that what you do with it should be determined by your own values rather than by an order that would have you renounce everything you love as the price of entry. He holds the boy's gaze steadily. I think the galaxy has a great deal of suffering in it that institutions have failed to address, and that people with your particular gifts have historically had two choices: serve the institution or be named its enemy. I think that is a false choice. And I think you are exactly the kind of person who could refuse it. The silence that follows is not empty. It has texture, weight, the specific density of an idea settling into a mind that was already prepared to receive it. Anakin looks back at the book on the desk. His hand comes to rest on its cover without quite picking it up, a gesture that has no tactical content, just the physical echo of a thought still completing itself. The outer systems, he said, the ones with real grievances. If the Republic addressed them, not with resolutions, but with actual enforcement, would the separatist movement collapse? Most of it, Palpatine said. The parts worth saving. Then why hasn't the Senate done it? Because the Senate is composed of people whose home systems benefit from the grievances remaining unaddressed. He says it the same way he says everything, without heat, without drama, as though it is simply a feature of the landscape they are both observing together. Power does not legislate against itself. This is not cynicism. It is physics. Anakin is quiet for a moment. Someone would have to make it, he said finally. Force the change. From outside the system, or above it. Palpatine does not respond immediately. He allows the silence to do what silence does in this room, to confirm without saying anything that can be recorded or repeated, that the thought is correct, that Anakin has arrived at it himself, that it belongs to him. That, he said at last, is historically how it has always worked. The lamp burns on. Anakin's hand rests on the book. And somewhere beneath the foundation of a 14-year-old's understanding of justice and power and the failure of institutions, something has been laid that will not move. Not by argument, not by evidence, not by a decade of Jedi council that will never come. The architecture is holding. Coruscant, the senatorial medical complex, private ward. Anakin is 19. The corridor outside Shmi's room is the kind of clean that has no smell, antiseptic scrubbed so thoroughly from the air that the absence itself registers, a sterile nothing that seems designed to prevent the senses from finding anything to hold on to. The lighting is even and shadowless. The floor reflects it back. Every surface communicates the same message in the same flat tone. This is a place where things are managed. Anakin has been sitting in the corridor for 6 hours. He is not sitting the way people sit when they are waiting for good news. His elbows are on his knees and his hands are locked together in front of him, and his eyes are fixed on a point approximately 18 inches in front of the floor, which is not a point that contains anything worth looking at. This is the posture of someone who has converted the energy of panic into stillness, because the alternative is a set of actions that would accomplish nothing and break several things. Inside the room, Shmi Skywalker is dying. The diagnosis arrived 11 days ago, a degenerative condition of the central nervous system, progressive and aggressive and, according to 3 separate specialists Palpatine summoned within 48 hours of the first test results, non-reversible. The specialists were the best available in the Corps. Palpatine ensured this personally, with the quiet efficiency of a man who treats every variable as a problem that can be solved if one applies sufficient resources and contacts. He sat with Shmi for 2 hours after the 3rd specialist's report, and Anakin, arriving late from a session with the military theorist Palpatine had recently added to his curriculum, found them together, his mother's hand in Palpatine's. The senator speaking to her in a low, steady voice about arrangements, about comfort, about what could be done even when the central thing could not. Anakin stood in the doorway for a moment before either of them saw him. What he saw on Palpatine's face, he has no clean word for, something that looked, in that unobserved moment, like genuine grief, the kind that does not perform itself, that exists in the body rather than the expression. He has turned that image over many times in the 11 days since. The door to the room opens now, and a nurse steps out, adjusts something on her data reader, and offers Anakin the professional non-expression of someone trained to communicate neither hope nor its absence, until a physician is present to manage the delivery. She goes. He watches the door close. His hands tighten against each other. The knuckle of his right thumb goes white. He knows the Force is doing something in him right now, has known it for years, has learned to recognize its register the way he recognizes the register of an engine running badly. A particular vibration beneath the surface of things that signals internal pressure without identifying its source. Right now it is very loud. Or not loud, present, dense, the way the air gets before a storm on a planet that actually has weather. He has no Jedi to explain this to him, no one who has sat with this particular quality of Force sensitivity and said, yes, this is what grief does to it. This is the shape of it. This is how you don't let it become something else. He has Palpatine, who has told him, carefully, across years of careful conversation, that what he feels is real and valid, and that the Jedi's answer to it is the philosophy of people who have chosen safety over honesty. This is in him now, at a molecular level, in the way that water gets into stone. He does not try to suppress what he feels. He has been taught not to. He sits with it, in the shadowless corridor, and it sits with him, and it is enormous. Palpatine arrives at the end of the corridor at the hour he said he would. He walks without an escort, he almost always does, in spaces where Anakin is present. Another thing that has been consistent enough across years to register as a form of language. He sits down next to Anakin on the bench without ceremony, without the adjustment of formal robes or the clearing of a throat. Simply sits. They are quiet together for a moment. "She's sleeping," Anakin said. His voice is level. This costs him something. "Good," Palpatine replied. "Sleep is real rest, at this stage. The body knows." Another silence. The corridor hums with filtered air. "You should go in," Palpatine said. "Not yet, let her sleep another hour. But tonight, sit with her. I've been sitting with her." "Sit with her and talk," he said. "Not about the illness, about Tatooine. About what she remembers before you were born. She has told me things about her own childhood that I suspect she has never told you. Because there was never the right moment, and now the moments are countable." His voice carries no urgency. It lands with the weight of something true. The countable moments are the ones to use. Anakin's jaw works slightly. He looks at the middle distance. "She asked me yesterday if I was happy," he said. Palpatine waited. I didn't know how to answer it. He exhales slowly through his nose. I told her yes. I don't know if it was true. I don't know if happiness is. I don't know if that's the right measure. His hands separate and come to rest on his knees, a fractional loosening. She looked at me like she knew I didn't know. "She has always known when you don't know," Palpatine said. "She has known you for 19 years. That is the specific knowledge that only time produces, and there is no substitute for it." Something in his tone shifts, not to warmth, exactly, because it is already warm, but to a different register of warmth, the one that carries weight. "When she is gone, you will carry that knowledge instead. Everything she knows about you becomes yours to hold." Anakin looks at him. It is the look he has been giving Palpatine since he was 9, direct, assessing, without deference, but there is something beneath it now that was not there at 9, something that has been added by years of exactly these conversations in exactly these moments. Reliance, not the reliance of weakness, but the specific reliance of someone who has learned that one particular source consistently tells the truth, and has reorganized their understanding of truth around that source without quite registering the reorganization as it happened. "I don't know how to do this," Anakin said. It is the most unguarded sentence he has produced in years. "No one does," Palpatine replied. "Anyone who tells you otherwise has either not lost someone or has forgotten what it was like before they learned to carry it. The learning is not pleasant, and it is not quick." He pauses. "But you are not someone who needs pleasant or quick. You are someone who goes through things. You always have been. This is also true. This is also being used. These two facts coexist without contradiction." Anakin nods once, not in agreement exactly, but in the way of someone receiving something they needed, without knowing they needed it, and feeling the shape of the need as it fills. 3 days later, Shmi Skywalker dies at the hour before dawn, with Anakin beside her and Palpatine in the outer corridor, present without inserting himself. The geometry of it precisely calibrated to give Anakin what he needs, while ensuring that what Anakin needs, in this moment that will calcify into permanent memory, is inseparable from Palpatine's presence just outside the door. The grief that moves through Anakin in the hours that follow is not something he suppresses. He has been taught not to. It moves through him like current through a conductor, finding every available path, and the Force moves with it, through it, in a register that would alarm any Jedi sensitive enough to feel it from the outside. It does not alarm him. He has been taught that it shouldn't. What it becomes, over the days and weeks of its processing, is not peace. Anakin Skywalker does not move through grief toward the Jedi's equanimity, because he has no map to that territory, and the man who has given him all his other maps considers equanimity a form of dishonesty. What it becomes, instead, is something harder and more durable. Shmi Skywalker died of a degenerative condition that the best medicine in the core could not reverse. She survived 40 years of slavery on a desert planet and was brought to safety and given 10 years of actual life, and it was not enough. And it was not enough. And the Republic that let her spend those 40 years in chains had passed 14 resolutions about it and done precisely nothing. He thinks about institutional failure, about the structures that describe their own arrangements as natural, about power that does not legislate against itself. He thinks about what Palpatine said 5 years ago, in the study with the lamp. Someone would have to make it. Force the change. The grief does not diminish. It finds a shape that can be carried. And the shape it finds is anger. And the anger finds the framework that has been waiting for it, assembled across 5 years of careful evenings, piece by piece, with the patience of a man who always knew this day was coming, and built the container before the thing that would fill it arrived. The architecture holds. Coruscant, Palpatine's private sub-level sanctum beneath the Senate building. Anakin is 22. The room does not exist on any architectural schematic filed with the Senate Building Authority. It does not appear on maintenance records, utility maps, or the security sweeps conducted quarterly by the Chancellor's personal detail. It is reached through a sequence of 3 doors, each requiring a different credential, the last of which opens only to Palpatine's own biometric signature, and one other. The addition of that second signature happened 6 months ago. Without ceremony, Palpatine simply pressing Anakin's palm to the reader and saying, "This is yours now," in the tone of someone transferring a household key. Anakin understood then that something was changing. He did not understand yet what it was changing into. He understands now. The sanctum is not theatrical. This is perhaps the first thing that strikes anyone who has absorbed enough popular mythology about the Sith to arrive with expectations. The expectation of darkness performed, of iconography, of the aesthetic vocabulary of evil that the galaxy has developed across centuries of cautionary tales. There is none of that here. The room is spare and functional, a long table, several chairs, shelves carrying objects whose significance is not immediately legible, and in the center of the far wall, a single piece of art, an ancient Sith manuscript page, mounted and sealed, its script flowing in a language Anakin spent 8 months learning to read at Palpatine's careful suggestion. He can read it now. It is a passage about the nature of power. He agreed with it before he knew what it was. Palpatine stands at the table's head. The quality of stillness he carries in this room is different from the stillness he carries in the Chancellor's office. Less managed, less performed, something underneath the performance allowed to surface. He is, in this room, most completely himself, and himself is something that the galaxy has never been permitted to see clearly. "You have questions," Palpatine said. "I've had questions for 3 weeks," Anakin replied. He is standing rather than sitting, has not yet moved to sit, something in him requiring the option of physical response, even in a room where no threat exists. "Since you showed me the Sith texts, since you explained what they were. And you are here," Palpatine observed, rather than having gone to the Jedi Council. "I don't go to the Jedi Council," Anakin said. "Flat, without heat. Factual, no," Palpatine agreed. "You don't." He moves to the nearest chair and sits, not behind the table but at its side. A deliberate geometry, removing hierarchy from the physical arrangement. "Ask them." Anakin looks at him for a long moment. Then he moves to a chair and sits. "You're Sith," he said. "I am," Palpatine replied. The word lands in the room and stays there. Anakin does not flinch from it. This is notable, and Palpatine notes it, and the thing he feels watching Anakin absorb this confirmation without fracturing is something he would not name to anyone, including himself, but which functions in him like pride. "The Sith are supposed to be extinct," Anakin said. "That's the Council's official position. Has been for 1,000 years." "The Council's official position," Palpatine replied, "reflects what the destruction of Ruzan allowed them to conclude. The Brotherhood of Darkness was annihilated at that battle. Every Sith presence the Jedi had been tracking, gone simultaneously. Darth Bane engineered that annihilation deliberately, then disappeared into the silence that followed, allowing the Jedi to read that silence as confirmation of what they already wished to believe. He constructed the rule of two precisely so the silence would hold. Two Sith, never more, invisible where the Brotherhood had been vast and obvious." He pauses. Institutions believe what serves their stability. The Jedi needed the Sith to be gone. Bane gave them conditions that let them believe it. Anakin's eyes moved to the manuscript on the wall. "Back, you've been teaching me Sith philosophy for 5 years," he said, without calling it that. "I have been teaching you to think clearly about power, attachment, and the nature of institutional truth." Palpatine replied, "Which is what Sith philosophy is, beneath its mythology. I did not name it for the same reason I did not name the Force when you were 9, because the name would have arrived before the understanding, and you would have organized your response to the name rather than to the ideas themselves." He holds Anakin's gaze. "You are not someone who should have other people's conclusions handed to you. You reach your own. I have only made certain you had the material to work with. This is precisely true." It is also the most elegant description of what has been done to Anakin Skywalker that Palpatine has ever articulated, and he allows himself to articulate it now, because Anakin is 22 and formed, and there is nothing in the description that could undo it, even if Anakin heard it as manipulation. Which he will not, because the framework through which he evaluates manipulation was itself built by Palpatine, and it has no category for this. "The dark side," Anakin said. "You're going to tell me it's not what the Jedi say it is. I am going to tell you what it is," Palpatine replied. "The Jedi will tell you it is corruption, addiction, destruction, a path that begins in passion and ends in ruin. This is not entirely false. It is the experience of people who approached it in fear, who used it as a substitute for the serenity they had lost, who took it as desperation rather than as a discipline." He leans forward slightly. "The dark side is will, undiluted will. The refusal to pretend that what you feel is less real than what you think, or that attachment diminishes clarity rather than sharpening it. The Jedi built a philosophy around the premise that desire corrupts judgment. I would ask you to consider, given everything you know about the Republic, about the Senate, about the 14 resolutions with no enforcement mechanisms, whether the Jedi's famous detachment has in fact produced better outcomes than passionate, committed, willful action would have." Anakin is quiet. Outside this room, above this room, the Senate building hums with the traffic of 1,000 political processes moving at the speed of institutional inertia. 32,000 member systems, committees and subcommittees and working groups, resolutions, debates, the machinery of deliberation that has been running for 1,000 years and has in that time failed to free a single slave on Tatooine. "What would you call what I am?" Anakin said. "If not a Sith." "I would call you my apprentice," Palpatine replied, "if you choose it, though the word carries weight that may not suit. The tradition of the Sith apprentice is historically one of subjugation, of the master using the student as a tool. That is not what I am offering." He pauses, and what surfaces in his voice is something calibrated so precisely to sincerity that no instrument exists to distinguish it from the genuine article. "I am offering you the truth about what you are, the training to use it fully, and a place at the center of what this galaxy is about to become, not as a weapon, as an architect." Anakin looks at the manuscript on the wall. He can read it. He agreed with it before he knew what it was. He thinks about his mother's hands on the kitchen counter, the expression she wore, touching a surface and not finding what she had braced for. 10 years of actual life. Not enough. None of the structures designed to protect people like her had moved a single inch toward protecting her, and she had died in the most expensive medical suite available, and it had made no difference to the outcome. Only to the quality of the waiting. He thinks about the boy he was at 9, taking inventory at the window, finding all the exits. He thinks about the fact that in this room, for the first time there are no exits he has not already mapped, not because the room prevents it, but because he is not looking for them. I want to understand the training, he said, what it actually is, not the mythology. The training, Palpatine replied, begins with honesty. The Jedi train by teaching students to distrust their own responses, to observe feeling from a distance, to maintain separation between what is felt and what is done. I train differently. We begin by establishing what you actually believe, what you actually value, what you are actually willing to do for the things that matter to you. He pauses. We already know the answers to most of those questions. We have been establishing them for 13 years. Anakin absorbs this. Then, we've already started, he said. We have always already started, Palpatine replied. The lamp burns in the spare, functional room. On the wall, the manuscript passage flows in a language Anakin spent 8 months learning to read. It is about the nature of power. He agreed with it the first time he read it. He agrees with it now, and now he knows what it is, and the agreement does not change. That is the point. That has always been the point. He does not choose the dark side tonight the way a person chooses a door. He simply recognizes, in this room, that he has been on the other side of it for years, and that the view from here is not what the Jedi described, and that everything he values is present and intact, and that the man across the table has never once lied to him. This is what he believes. The architecture is complete. Coruscant. The Jedi Temple. The High Council Chamber. Anakin is 23. The chamber sits at the peak of the temple's tallest spire, and at this hour, early morning, the city still in its amber pre-dawn register, the light comes through the curved windows at an angle that turns the floor to pale gold, and makes the 12 chairs look less like seats of deliberation than like objects that have been here long enough to become part of the building's geology. Which, in some sense, they have. The Jedi Order has occupied this temple for 4,000 years. The weight of that is present in the stone itself, in the particular quality of silence that accumulates in rooms where consequential things have been decided for longer than most civilizations have existed. 7 of the 12 seats are occupied this morning. Mace Windu sits with his hands resting flat on his knees, a posture that looks like stillness and functions like readiness. He has been a Jedi Master for 18 years. He has fought in 4 conflicts, negotiated 11, and developed across those decades a sensitivity to the texture of situations that goes beyond force perception into something almost architectural. An instinct for the structural integrity of arrangements, for the specific quality of wrongness that presents when a load-bearing element has been quietly removed and the surface above it has not yet registered the absence. He has felt that quality around the Chancellor's household for 6 years. He has raised it. Formally. Twice. Once when Anakin Skywalker was 16, and beginning to appear at diplomatic functions beside Palpatine, with a quality of physical confidence that Mace found disproportionate to his years. And once when the boy was 20, and Mace had encountered him briefly at a Senate reception, and felt with a clarity that required no interpretation. The Force moving around him in a pattern that had no innocent explanation. Both times the Council had responded with variations of the same position. They had no legal standing, no evidence, no cause that would not constitute a diplomatic provocation against the sitting Chancellor of the Republic. Both times Mace had accepted the position and said nothing further in the meeting and returned to his quarters and sat with the wrongness for an hour before the discipline of decades brought him back to equilibrium. This is the 3rd time. The disturbance is not new, Yoda said. He occupies his chair with the particular economy of someone for whom physical presence has long since ceased to require demonstration. 900 years of life have compressed into a stillness that is less like restraint than like bedrock. Something that has been still for so long, it has become a different category of thing than stillness. Felt it, we have, for years. Around the boy. Around the Chancellor. Around the Chancellor, Mace said, since before the boy. The room receives this. Obi-Wan Kenobi sits 2 seats to Mace's left, recently elevated to the council, still carrying the slight quality of someone who has not yet fully inhabited a room he has newly been granted permission to enter. He is 38, precise, and possessed of the particular kind of intelligence that expresses itself as carefulness rather than speed. He has reviewed the available information on Anakin Skywalker 3 times since his elevation, because the file is the kind of file that rewards rereading, not for what it contains, but for the consistent shape of what it doesn't. The midi-chlorian estimates, Obi-Wan said, the ones from the Senate medical records, cross-referenced with what the healers here could extrapolate from proximity readings at public events. He paused. They align with what Master Qui-Gon approximated from Tatooine, ambient readings from the quarter, accounts from the Toydarian who had owned the boy. Qui-Gon never met Anakin directly. The child was already on Coruscant by the time we landed, but the estimate Qui-Gon filed was striking enough that he brought it to the council within a week of returning. Qui-Gon's report, Mace said, and the name carried in it 20 years of a specific grief, a grief for the loss of a man, and also for the particular kind of loss that happens when someone who saw something clearly is no longer present to keep insisting on it. He said the boy was the highest count he had ever estimated, higher than any recorded, and the Chancellor adopted him 8 days after Qui-Gon's death, Obi-Wan said. The sentence was not pointed. It did not need to be. The chamber held the implication without anyone speaking it aloud. This is one of the things the Council is good at, holding implications, turning them, examining them from multiple angles without the impatience that causes lesser deliberative bodies to resolve ambiguity before they have fully understood it. Yoda's eyes move to the window. The city outside is shifting registers as the light builds. What the Force tells us, he said slowly, is not the same as what we can act on. Know this, all of you do. The Force, Mace replied, with a precision that was not disrespectful, has been telling us something is wrong with that household since the boy was 9 years old. We have acted on it 14 years worth of nothing. Careful, you must be, Yoda said, with the word nothing. Watched we have. Waited we have. Learned the shape of it, we have. This is not nothing. It has produced nothing, Mace replied. Yoda looked at him. The look carried the weight of 9 centuries, which is a specific weight that does not require translation. Produced nothing yet, he said. Obi-Wan shifts slightly in his chair. He has been on the council long enough to understand that certain exchanges between Yoda and Mace have a grammar that predates his membership by decades, and that his function in those exchanges is to wait for the moment when his perspective becomes the relevant one rather than inserting it prematurely. That moment arrives now. The Clone Wars, he said. If what we suspect is correct, if the Chancellor has some interest in the conflict beyond what he has stated publicly, then the war itself becomes a mechanism. He chose his words with the care of someone who understands that, in this room, imprecision is its own category of error. And Skywalker becomes a variable in that mechanism that we have had no access to and no influence over for 14 years. What you're describing, Mace said, is a weapon, built by the man we are constitutionally required to advise and protect. The word weapon sat in the gold-lit air. Yoda closed his eyes. This was not evasion, it was the opposite, the specific quality of attention he brought to things that required more than ordinary perception to see clearly. He sat with it for a long moment, long enough that the light through the windows moved perceptibly. When he opened them, he said, "Seen the boy. Has anyone spoken with him?" "I spoke with him at the Corellian trade reception," Obi-Wan said. 14 months ago. Briefly, he was present as part of the Chancellor's diplomatic party. We were introduced by a Trade Commission aide who seemed unaware that the introduction might be significant. He paused. He was precise, controlled. He engaged with me the way someone engages with a category rather than a person. Not hostile. Not warm. As though he had been briefed on what a Jedi Master was and was consulting the briefing in real time. "Did you sense the dark side?" Mace asked. Obi-Wan took a breath. "I sensed someone who had been very thoroughly taught what to feel about Jedi Masters. And I sensed the Force around him at a magnitude that He stopped. Chose the next words exactly. I have never felt anything like it. And I have been in proximity to masters with 60 years of training. The chamber was very quiet. Which means, Mace said, that whatever the Chancellor has or hasn't done to him ideologically, the raw capability is real, is present, is 23 years old, and has had no formal training in any tradition we recognize. Or, Obi-Wan said carefully, has had training we don't recognize. The implication of that landed differently than the previous ones, landed with a specific quality of weight that shifted the conversation from suspicion into something closer to recognition. The shape of the thing they had been circling for 14 years becoming, in the gold light of the morning council chamber, slightly more legible. Yoda opened his hands in his lap. A small gesture. Final, move carefully we must, he said. Legal standing we lack. Proof we lack. What we have is the Force's warning and the memory of a child on Tatooine who should have come to us and did not. His voice carried no accusation in it, only the specific grief of someone who has lived long enough to know exactly what the cost of caution looks like, and who chose it anyway, and who lives inside that choice. Act on suspicion alone against the Chancellor of the Republic. That road ends the Order faster than any enemy. And if we don't act, Mace said. Yoda looked at him with 900 years of understanding. That road, he said quietly, we may already be on. The decision reached in the next hour is measured, procedural, politically defensible. They will move to confront Palpatine directly, quietly, with sufficient Jedi present to make the legal case, and remove the variable of Skywalker from the equation before the boy can be used as the weapon they now believe he has been built to be. It is the right decision, reached by the right process, supported by the best available evidence, made by people of genuine wisdom and genuine good faith. Obi-Wan voices the thing no one else will, as they are filing out, quietly enough that it might be taken as rhetorical. And if the boy stands between us and the Chancellor? No one answers. The chamber holds the question in the gold light, and the silence that follows is not uncertainty. It is dread. Coruscant, the Chancellor's executive suite. Republic Office Complex. Late afternoon. The building's upper corridors are the kind of quiet that belongs to late-shift government work. A skeleton crew of administrative staff, 2 security rotations, the low hum of systems running without supervision. The Chancellor's personal suite occupies the entire eastern face of the top floor, its windows looking out over the Senate dome, and, beyond it, the temple's 5 spires catching the last of the day's light, at an angle that turns them briefly, beautifully copper before the amber of evening takes over. Mace Windu does not look at the spires. He walks the corridor at the head of 4 masters, Agan Kolar, Ceci Tin, Kit Fisto, and 3 steps behind, Obi-Wan, who requested inclusion and was granted it with the understanding that his role is witness and secondary, not primary force. 5 Jedi. Enough to make the legal case and manage the variable of resistance if the intelligence is correct. Not enough to constitute a military action, which matters for every record that will be written about this moment afterward. The intelligence is correct. Mace has not permitted himself to use the word no, but he has stopped using the word suspect. He pauses at the suite's outer door. The security panel registers his diplomatic credentials, the Jedi Council's standing access. Granted by the Senate itself, never revoked because no one in 14 years of the Chancellor's administration has considered that it might need to be. He presses his palm to the reader. The door opens. They enter. Palpatine is at his desk. He looks up from a data reader with the expression of a man interrupted during ordinary work, not startled. Because Sheev Palpatine has not been startled by anything in 40 years, but calibrated to the frequency of mild administrative surprise. The expression says, "I was not expecting visitors at this hour." The expression is, like everything else he has worn in this office for 14 years, a garment. "Master Windu," he said, "this is unscheduled." "Chancellor," Mace stopped 3 meters from the desk. The other masters positioned themselves without being directed, the geometry of people who have trained together long enough that spatial arrangement has become reflexive. "We are here on a matter that requires your immediate and direct response. I ask that you hear what I have to say before speaking." Palpatine set the data reader down. folded his hands. Of course. The Jedi Council has accumulated significant evidence that the individual occupying the office of Supreme Chancellor of the Galactic Republic is, and has for an undetermined period been, a practitioner of the Sith tradition. Mace's voice is level, declarative, stripped of the affect that would make it sound like an accusation, rather than a finding. In accordance with the Council's authority under the original charter of the Jedi Order as Peacekeepers of the Republic, we are here to remand you to Council custody pending a full Senate investigation. The suite is very quiet. Palpatine looks at Mace Windu for a long moment with an expression that moves through several registers in quick succession. Confusion, then hurt. Then something that in a lesser man would be called fear. In Palpatine it is simply the next garment, put on with the smoothness of long practice. "This is an extraordinary accusation," he said quietly. "Master Windu, I have worked alongside the Jedi Order for, Chancellor." Mace's hand moved to his lightsaber. Not igniting it. Resting there. "I am not here to debate the accusation." The door behind them opens. Anakin Skywalker walks in. He is in his customary dark clothing, the practical, unornamented style he has worn since his mid-teens, the clothing of someone who has never needed fabric to communicate his importance. He reads the room in approximately 1 second, the way he reads all rooms, the rapid full-spectrum inventory that was survival habit at 9 and is something more trained and more dangerous at 23. 5 Jedi. The geometry of their positions. Mace's hand at his saber. Palpatine behind the desk, still seated, hands folded, watching Anakin's face with an expression that contains, beneath every layer of performance, one thing that is not performance. Trust. The absolute, unqualified trust of a man who built something and believes in what he built. "Anakin," Obi-Wan said. He took a half-step forward. His voice carries the warmth he genuinely feels. Obi-Wan Kenobi does not perform his feelings, which is part of what makes him the most sympathetic person in this room, and the most irrelevant to what is about to happen. "We need you to step back. This doesn't concern. This is my father's office," Anakin said. The sentence is not raised, not heated. It has the quality of a line drawn, not a declaration made, the statement of a boundary rather than a position, which is in some ways more final. Mace looked at him directly. 14 years of suspicion, of council sessions, of carefully modulated inaction, all of it compressed into this moment, into the specific assessment happening behind Mace Windu's eyes as he looks at a 23-year-old man and measures what he is. "Anakin Skywalker," he said. "Stand aside." Anakin looked at the 5 Jedi. He looked with the directness he has always looked with, the quality of attention that catalogs without performance, and what he saw was what he has always known the Jedi to be. People who decided, before he was born, what he should be, and where he should go, and who should have access to him, who let his mother spend 40 years in chains while passing resolutions, who stand now in his father's office with hands at their weapons and call it peacekeeping. He looked at Palpatine. Palpatine held his gaze, said nothing. The trust in his expression did not change. Anakin looked back at Mace. "You came to his office," Anakin said, "with 4 masters and your hand on your saber. You are arresting a man you have no evidence against, in a building you have access to only because he granted it, because your institution has decided that the most powerful man in the Republic has become inconvenient." The voice remains level. "You have never spoken to me. In 23 years, no member of your council has once attempted to speak with me as a person, rather than as an asset you were denied. You are strangers who decided I belonged to you before you knew my name. That's not," Obi-Wan began. "The Outer Rim systems have been filing complaints with the Senate for 60 years, Anakin continued, and there is something in his voice now that is colder than anger. The specific cold of someone who has done the math and is reporting the result. The slavery abolition resolutions have no enforcement mechanisms because the systems that benefit from the current structure removed them. The Jedi Order has had diplomatic authority in the Republic for 1,000 years and has filed 0 interventions on behalf of the Outer Rim. 0. He paused. "You are not peacekeepers. You are the enforcement arm of a system that works for the people it was designed to work for. Mace ignited his saber. The purple blade filled the room with a light that was not gentle. Anakin's lightsaber was in his hand before Mace finished the movement, not ignited yet, just present, the way a door can be opened without anyone having walked through it. His body did not change its posture. He was not bracing. He was simply there, completely, in the way of someone for whom the present moment contains no ambiguity. Mace moved. He was fast. He has always been fast. And his Va'apad form, which channels the darkness it encounters back through itself, which requires its practitioner to make contact with the shadow in their own nature to function, is precisely calibrated to the kind of opponent he believes Anakin to be. He covered the distance in 2 steps and brought his blade across in the opening form, and it was, technically, exactly correct. Anakin caught it. Not blocked, caught, blade to blade, with a counter-pressure that stopped Mace's strike with a completeness that registered in Mace's arms as something closer to impact with a wall than impact with a person. Mace pushed. Anakin did not move. The force was present around Anakin at a magnitude that Mace registered physically, the way you register a pressure change, a density in the air, a weight that had no business existing around someone with no formal training in any recognized tradition. Kolar and Tyen moved simultaneously, flanking from both sides. Anakin released Mace's blade with a push that sent the master back 3 steps, turned, and met Kolar's incoming strike with a deflection that redirected the blade into the wall beside him. Clean, precise, no wasted motion. While simultaneously extending his left hand toward Tien and catching the second master in a force push, so targeted, it lifted Tien off the floor and put him through the office's interior partition wall without touching either Obi-Wan or Palpatine. Kolar pressed. Anakin let him come. What Kolar was attempting was technically correct. What Anakin did in response was not technically anything. It was the specific movement of someone who does not think in forms, who has no form, who moves through a fight the way he moved through pod racing circuits, by the direct knowledge of where everything is going before it arrives there. He took Kolar's blade off its line with his elbow, stepped inside the arc, and ended the engagement with a precision that was, in the language of force combat, final. Fisto lasted longer. He was the most fluid of them, adaptive, and he recognized within the first exchange that what he was facing was not trained unpredictability, but something worse. Native unpredictability, the specific danger of someone who cannot be read because they were never written in a recognizable language. He pressed for 40 seconds and acquitted himself honestly, and it was not enough. Mace recovered. He came back with everything Vapad had, fully committed, and there were 10 seconds in which it was genuinely close, Mace's form finding the edges of Anakin's forward momentum, testing them. The purple blade near enough to Anakin's face twice that the air between them registered it. Anakin took a cut across the left forearm. He registered it. Did not stop. He ended it by doing something Mace had never seen and could not have predicted. He stopped fighting Mace's blade entirely, and instead stepped into the strike, inside its arc, accepting the controlled contact in order to be close enough to put his hand flat against Mace Windu's chest and release a force push from that distance, point blank, with nothing between the output and the target. Mace went across the room and did not get up. The suite was quiet again. The amber light through the tall windows had deepened into early evening, the temple's spires still visible, still copper-touched, indifferent. Anakin stood in the center of it, breathing steadily. The cut on his forearm was producing a dark stain at his sleeve's edge. He looked at it with the brief attention of someone assessing rather than feeling, then looked at Palpatine. Palpatine rose from behind his desk. He crossed to the room's center without hurry, stepped past the evidence of the last 90 seconds with the manner of a man moving through furniture that has been rearranged, and stopped in front of Anakin. He looked at the sleeve. He looked at Anakin's face. Then he did something that Mace Windu, conscious and watching from the floor with the specific awareness of a man who has just had his understanding of several things revised simultaneously, would remember for the rest of his life. He placed his hand on Anakin's shoulder, gently, the way a father does, when a son has come home. And from somewhere in the wreckage of the room, there was a sound, a wounded Jedi, still present, and Palpatine crossed to him with the unhurried calm of a man running a minor errand. And the sound stopped. The suite was quiet. "Are you hurt?" Palpatine said to Anakin. Not asked, said, the emphasis not on the question but on the subject. You, not the room, not the situation. You, no, Anakin replied. Palpatine looked at the sleeve. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Let me see to that." Coruscant, the Jedi Temple. 3 hours before dawn. The temple has looked like this before, lit from within at night, its spires burning against the dark of the city, but always as a sign of life, of activity, of the specific productive wakefulness of an institution that never fully sleeps. Initiates in the dormitories, nights on late meditation rotations, the healer's ward keeping its own hours, the archives, always lit, because knowledge is not organized on a schedule. Tonight, the light is wrong. It comes from the wrong places, at the wrong color temperature, with a quality that anyone who has lived in the temple long enough would recognize before they could name. The light of things burning that were not meant to burn, orange where the temple's internal lighting is always white, flickering where the temple does not flicker. Anakin walks through the main entrance at the head of 200 soldiers. He has been here once before, a brief visit at 16, a diplomatic function in one of the temple's public reception rooms. Accompanied by Palpatine and 3 Senate aides, a room in which every Jedi present had treated him with the specific careful courtesy of people handling something they were uncertain about. He had catalogued the temple's layout from that single visit, with the attention he gives all spaces. He knows, in the way he knows things, where the load-bearing elements are. He has given the 501st their orders in clear, specific language, entry points, movement corridors, timing sequences. He spoke to them the way Palpatine speaks to him, without heat, without ceremony, as though the communication of tactical information is simply a form of clarity between people who understand what they are doing and why. The soldiers understand what they are doing. Whether they understand why is not Anakin's concern. He is 23 years old and has been taught, across years of careful evenings, that power does not require consensus, it requires decision, and the will to see the decision through. He has the will. This is the part that is different from the story the galaxy has told itself about this moment for 1,000 years. The story in which a Jedi turned, in which someone with the Order's values and the Order's training chose against his family and was broken by it. That story has a particular shape, the fall, the horror, the anguish that gives the villain humanity and the audience somewhere to locate its grief. That story requires someone who had something to betray. Anakin Skywalker walks through the Jedi Temple the way he walked through Watto's shop as a child, as someone who has no history with this space, no affection for it, no memory attached to any of its surfaces. The temple is a building. The Order inside it is an institution with interests it does not acknowledge. He has understood this since he was 14. He moves without hesitation. The first engagements are brief and tactically unambiguous. Knights on night rotation encountering the column, and attempting to organize a defense that the column's numbers and Anakin's presence at its head makes structurally impossible within the first 90 seconds. He does not take pleasure in it. He also does not take time. The distinction between those two things has been made clear to him. Cruelty is inefficiency dressed as emotion, and he has never had patience for either. From somewhere deeper in the temple, a sound that registers as alarm and resolve simultaneously. The specific sound of people who know what is happening and have chosen to face it rather than flee. Knights pulling initiates toward secured rooms. Masters moving toward the source of the incursion with the measured speed of people who have trained for scenarios they hoped would never arrive. In the archive wing, a light that was always burning goes dark. Anakin does not go to the archive wing. He goes to the council chamber. It is empty when he arrives. The chairs in their circle, the windows showing Coruscant's pre-dawn amber, the floor pale in the early light. He stands in its center for a moment. 12 chairs in a circle, each representing a position that had, for 14 years, discussed his existence as a variable in their calculations without once speaking to him as a person. He has nothing to say to the room. He leaves. The deeper passages of the temple are where the last organized resistance forms. A group of 11, a mix of knights and 2 masters, one of whom Anakin recognizes from the diplomatic reception at 16, as someone who had looked at him with the specific expression of a person carefully not reaching for something. Master Koth. He was not in Palpatine's office last night, which means he received the news some other way and had enough hours to organize what he could. 11 is not enough, and Koth knows it. But he is Jedi, which means the math has never been the deciding factor. They face each other in the corridor outside the meditation rooms. 11 blades ignited, green, blue, 1 gold, throwing color across the stone walls in the particular way of lightsabers in enclosed spaces. Everything moving, nothing stable. Anakin ignited his blade. He has had no form training. What he has is 23 years of mechanical intuition, a force sensitivity at a magnitude that none of the 11 people across from him have encountered outside of mythology. And the specific advantage of someone who cannot be read because he learned to fight the way he learned to build, from first principles, by feel, by the direct knowledge of what the next second is about to require. The 11 moved together, which was correct. Individually they had no chance and they knew it. Together they had something that was not a chance but was at least a fact about the situation that needed to be addressed. Anakin addressed it. Afterward, in the meditation room corridor, the silence has the specific texture of completion, not peace, not resolution, just the state of having reached the end of the available resistance. He stands in it for a moment. His forearm throbs at the cut from last night, which he has not had seen to beyond basic field dressing. He registers it and moves on. The sound that finds him in the temple's eastern passage is a lightsaber igniting behind him. He turns. Obi-Wan Kenobi stands 12 meters away. He is alone. He has clearly arrived separately from whatever organized response the temple managed to put together. There is a quality to his presence, to the specific way he is standing. That suggests someone who came not as part of a plan, but because arriving was the only option he could locate in himself. His blue blade burns in the corridor's half-light. His face carries the specific expression of someone who has resolved something internally and is now on the other side of the resolution. In the country that comes after a decision is made, and before its consequences are known. He looks at Anakin with the particular attention of someone who has been studying a problem for 14 months and is now standing inside it. "I spoke to the council this morning," Obi-Wan said. "After the Chancellor's office. I told them what I felt when I stood near you at the Corellian reception." He paused. "I told them it was the largest thing I had ever felt in the Force. I told them we had made a catastrophic error." Anakin waited. "I'm not here to fight you," Obi-Wan said. "Your blade is ignited," Anakin replied. "Yes," Obi-Wan agreed, with the specific honesty of someone who has stopped managing what he says. "Because I am also not certain I'm not here to fight you. I haven't decided." He held Anakin's gaze. "I wanted to speak to you first, before anything else. I wanted to say that we were wrong. The council was wrong. To let 14 years go by without once attempting to reach you as a person rather than a problem. I wanted you to know that I know that." Something in the corridor went very still. "You're apologizing," Anakin said. "I am acknowledging a failure," Obi-Wan replied. "I don't know if it rises to an apology. I think some failures are too large for apology and too real to leave unnamed." He took a breath. "I also want to tell you that what he has done to you, whatever has been built in that household across 23 years, is not something you chose. Not fully. I want you to know that I understand the difference between a choice and an architecture." Anakin looked at him. He looked at Obi-Wan Kenobi, at a man he has met once, briefly, at a diplomatic reception, who looked at him with careful courtesy and registered as a category, and he felt something that he did not have a prepared response to, because the framework he carries does not have a slot for this specific thing, a stranger extending. Without strategy, without position, without anything to gain from it. The simple recognition of what was done. The framework has no slot for it, because Palpatine did not build one. It lasted approximately 3 seconds. Then Anakin raised his blade and the corridor filled with blue and red light, and what followed was not long. Obi-Wan was precise and honest and deeply skilled, and it was not enough. Had never been going to be enough. And both of them understood this before the first exchange concluded. Obi-Wan fought the way he lived, with care and exactness and genuine commitment, and Anakin moved through his defense the way he moved through everything, by the knowledge of where it was going before it arrived there. Obi-Wan took a knee at the end of it. His blade was gone. He was looking at the floor, breathing carefully, and he said something quiet that Anakin had to lean slightly forward to hear. "The Order served something real," Obi-Wan said. "Imperfectly, with all the failures you named. But something real." He raised his eyes. "I hope whatever you build is worth what you burned to build it." He said it without bitterness. He said it the way you deliver a message when you are not certain the recipient will ever have occasion to consider it, but you send it anyway, because the alternative is silence, and silence is not honest. He closed his eyes. When Anakin contacted Palpatine from the temple's main hall 40 minutes later, the message was brief. The transmission was secure. Outside the tall windows, Coruscant was beginning its daily shift from amber to gray, the city entirely unaware that the world it would wake up to was structurally different from the world it had gone to sleep in. "It's done," Anakin said. A pause. Then Palpatine's voice, warm and unhurried and carrying in it the specific quality of someone who has waited a very long time for a very particular thing, and is now, quietly, in possession of it. "Come home," he said. Coruscant, the Galactic Senate chamber. 6 weeks after the temple. The Senate chamber has hosted 10,000 sessions across 1,000 years of Republic history. And in that time it has developed a grammar of occasion, the specific arrangements of light and sound and pageantry that signal to its 50,000 attending delegates and the billions watching on the HoloNet that what is happening today is different in kind from what happens on ordinary days. The pod formations are locked in ceremonial position. The banners that normally carry the Republic's sigil have been changed overnight, the new design not yet familiar enough to read as anything but deliberate. The shape of the old Republic emblem, simplified, sharpened. The soft curves of 1,000-year-old democracy rendered in lines that suggest something with fewer doubts about itself. The chamber is full. This is not unusual for a declaration session. What is unusual is the quality of the fullness, the specific silence of 50,000 people who have made individual calculations about what this moment requires of them and arrived, by a variety of routes, at the same answer. No one is absent. No one who received a summons is absent. Palpatine stands at the central podium. He is dressed in robes that are simultaneously the robes of the Supreme Chancellor and something else, darker, more considered, the fabric carrying a weight that his senatorial wardrobe never carried, as though the clothing itself understands that the office being inaugurated today is not the office of a Republic functionary, however powerful, but something that requires a different vocabulary entirely. He looks from the chamber floor like a man who has been waiting his entire life to stand in this exact spot and has the patience not to show it. His face carries sorrow. He has always been able to carry sorrow when it serves. The Jedi Order, he says, and his voice through the chamber's amplification, is the voice the galaxy has trusted for 14 years. Warm, measured, grieved, launched an unprovoked attack on the office of the Chancellor of the Galactic Republic. This is not allegation. This is documented fact, witnessed, recorded, and available for any member body that wishes to review the evidence in its entirety. The chamber receives this. They have been moving against the Republic for years, quietly, incrementally, with the patience of an institution that believed its own mythology so completely that it ceased to distinguish between its interests and the galaxy's. He pauses, and the pause has the weight of a man who takes no pleasure in saying what he is saying, which is perhaps the most complete lie he has ever told, and therefore the most beautiful. I bear them no malice. Many among them served genuinely and believed genuinely. The failure was of leadership and doctrine, not of every individual heart. The sympathy this produces is audible. 50,000 people making the small sounds of people who are being given permission to feel charitable about something that frightens them. What is required now, Palpatine continues, is not grief, but clarity. The Republic has shown us, across the last decade of crisis, that its structures were not equal to the challenges of a galaxy this large and this fractured. The Senate has deliberated magnificently on problems it was not designed to solve. The Jedi have kept peace in corridors too narrow for the actual conflicts. We have been governing with instruments built for a different era. He lets the silence extend one beat past comfort. What I am proposing today is not the end of democracy. It is its maturation. A galactic empire, governed by law, with a Senate that retains its legislative function and a single executive authority with the mandate and the means to enforce the agreements this body has been passing for 1,000 years, without the capacity to see them kept. The applause begins before he finishes the sentence. It is not unanimous. There are pods where hands do not move. Faces that carry the expression of people doing rapid and private calculations. But it is vast, and it builds, and within 40 seconds it has the self-reinforcing quality of a sound that makes everyone inside it feel that they are part of a consensus, rather than performing one. Bail Organa does not applaud. He sits in the Alderaan pod with his hands in his lap and watches Palpatine at the podium, with the expression of a man watching something he had hoped would not happen, and had privately known would, and he is already, in the part of his mind that never stops working, beginning to think about what comes next. There is nothing that comes next. He does not know this yet. In the executive gallery above the main chamber floor, Padme Amidala watches. She is senator for Naboo now, has been for 3 years, has served with the specific quality of seriousness she brings to everything, has built coalitions and drafted legislation and argued on the Senate floor for positions she believed in with the force of someone who has never treated politics as theater. She is 27 years old, and she is watching the end of the Republic from a gallery seat, and she is doing the calculation that everyone in this building is doing, except that she is doing it without the self-protective softening that most of them are applying to their results. She knew Anakin Skywalker the way senators know the children of powerful colleagues, by reputation, by occasional diplomatic function, by the specific quality of awareness that attaches to someone everyone around them treats as significant. She had opinions about him that she kept private. She never had occasion to form anything else. She thinks about this now, with a specificity that surprises her, the thought arriving not as political analysis, but as something more personal and less nameable. A sense of proximity to an alternate version of this moment that she cannot locate precisely enough to examine. Something that might have been different. Someone who might have made it different. The thought is brief. She is not someone who permits herself extended residence in the conditional. She watches Palpatine at the podium, and she keeps her hands still, and she begins, quietly, in the privacy of her own mind, to think about what she believes in and what she is willing to do for it. It is the beginning of something. She does not know yet what the something is. She does not know yet that it will not be enough, that the window for enough has closed in a corridor in the Jedi Temple 6 weeks ago and will not reopen in her lifetime. The applause continues. The new banners catch the chamber's light. The session ends. The declarations are filed. The transition begins. That evening, in the private residence that adjoins the Imperial Executive Suite, the apartment that has been home to Anakin Skywalker for 14 years, and that has changed around him as he changed, larger now, more considered. The accumulated evidence of a life lived in proximity to power, and eventually as an expression of it. Palpatine sits in the chair by the window. Anakin is across from him. They have been sitting in some version of this arrangement for 14 years, in various rooms, at various hours, and the arrangement has always carried the same quality. The specific ease of two people who have learned each other so completely that the silence between them requires no management. Outside, the city is celebrating. Or performing celebration, which in a city of 10 trillion people is functionally identical. The HoloNet is running continuous coverage. The Emperor's address is being rebroadcast every 20 minutes on the primary channels. The transition teams are in every government building. "You should sleep," Palpatine said. "I will," Anakin replied. He is looking at the window, not through it, at it. At the reflection of the room in the dark glass, the two of them rendered an overlay against the amber glow of the city beyond. Palpatine looks at him for a moment with the expression he has spent 23 years allowing himself only in private. Not the Chancellor's face, not the Emperor's face, but something underneath both of them. Something that is either genuine or has been performed so consistently for so long that the distinction has been fully dissolved. He is the only person alive, who knows which. He rises from the chair, crosses to the low shelf against the interior wall. On it, Among the objects that have traveled with Anakin from the 43rd floor apartment to here, the accumulated small material history of a life, there is a drawing. Pencil on rough paper, the paper itself aged and slightly fragile, the image a woman's face rendered by a child who was learning to see and to make what he saw real. The lines are uneven. The likeness, to anyone who had known her, is exact. Palpatine looks at it for a moment. Then he leaves it where it is. He has considered, across the years, whether to remove it, whether the object functions as a variable, an anchor to something prior, a thread that might, under the right conditions, pull in the wrong direction. He has concluded, each time, that removing it would be a mistake. The drawing stays because Anakin needs it to stay. The grief for Shmi Skywalker was the vessel into which everything else was poured, and the vessel should remain intact. He understands love well enough to preserve it. "Good night," Palpatine said. "Good night," Anakin replied, still looking at the window, at the reflection of the room, at the amber city spreading in every direction without horizon. Outside, Coruscant celebrated its new era. Inside the apartment, a pencil drawing of a woman's face sat on a shelf, undisturbed. The Emperor walked down the hall. The door closed. The lamp burned on. "Let us know what you'd like to see next." The end.